today's Tanya for Wednesday, this is page 84. It's a pretty short Tanya, but you have to remember there's a flow here. And just remember the flow. Flow number one. There was a verse in Isaiah saying that the verse in Isaiah said the reward for the Maaseh Tzedakah, the act of tzedakah, you know what the reward for that is? Peace. You know what the reward for, and then there's act of tzedakah, Maaseh Tzedakah, then there's avodat hatzedakah, the service of tzedakah. And the reward for that second, similar but different term is there will be quietness and security forever. So in classic Hasidism, like what's the difference of the two terms and why do they have different resultant rewards? So we went off on a little bit of a tangent by way of preface, explaining that we by way of preface, Maaseh Tzedakah and Avodat HaTzedakah is, let's move away from that. The way God creates and animates the world is through the system called the 10 Sefirot. In particular, the first three, or whatever, not particular, but the first three are the first emotive ones are Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, which in the anthropomorphic terms we would call that free loving kindness, exacting justice and discernment, and then compassion. And it's a mixture of all three in which to create. And to create and to give and constantly create and bestow. Then we said that in order to, and just explaining this cake mix, the spiritual cake mix, the cosmology cake mix is how do the two opposite energies, also known, by the way, mentioned as the archangel Michael and the
Archangel.
How do you say it?
Archangel.
The archangel Michael and archangel Gavriel, both embodying the two sfirot. How do they make peace and work together? Because you need both to make a system. That's through the third sephira energy, compassion, which is kind of a bird's eye view that can bring them two together. And when Mashiach comes, it'll be pretty straightforward to elicit God's kindness because there'll be no bad really to make friction or resistance. You're not going to have to constantly do surgery to take out the evil, the negativity that exists in our reality inside and outside. You won't have to constantly do, surgery to take away the negative, the evil. It'll just be separated, and the good will prosper. But till then, our whole raison d'etre is grappling with the good and the bad, and overcoming the good, and bring to the forefront the good over the bad. Okay. How do you bring the forefront the good from the bad? By the way, that's another way of saying you're trying to bring the chesed, the good, the kindness, and not be stopped by the gevura. It's another permutation of that same principle. How do you do that? We said, how do you bring chesed and not get stopped by the friction that gevura demands? You have to elicit the third way, which is compassion. Which is rooted in a transcendent, I'd say, bird's eye energy that's kind of above the system, that can, despite, let's say, the imperfections, it can bring forth the goodness and not give into the friction of the badness. But you have to initiate that. And you initiate that by your Torah and your mitzvahs. Every time you learn Torah for the sake of the right reason, for the sake of heaven, you are bringing the good in you out and you're neutralizing, at least temporarily, the bad. When you pray, you're also struggling, but you're bringing the good to the forefront and trying to, leave behind the negativity. How are you doing that? Because those times you're getting this kind of, we said you always need tiferet, always compassion to be successful. To be successful, a transcendent bird's eye view energy. And the same is true with tzedakah. I'm just summarizing to get the flow. And the same is true of tzedakah. Tzedakah, what is tzedakah? Tzedakah is all about compassion, right? You don't have to give it. You're not by law mandated justice to give him. I mean, on some level, yeah, but it's always a free choice. And you do, that is exhibiting compassion, which means you are bringing the transcendent energy that can bring the good forward and kind of keep the bad separated and not at the forefront. Okay, that's just a review. Wednesday, let's read it inside. Now, it is well known that Jews, by their very nature, act compassionately and perform deeds of loving kindness. It says in the Gemara, there are 3 epigenes in the Jewish people, which is compassion, kindness, and modesty, bashfulness.
Tznius, yeah.
Which, by the way, just so you know, those 3 things are again mirroring the 3 principal creative energies that are needed, right? The Torah says that the Jew has inborn kindness, chesed, inborn bashfulness, modesty. That's a form of reticence, good reticence, which is gevura, holding back, not like throwing yourself, immodestly or inappropriately on others. And the third one is, we said, rachmanim. They're merciful. Again, everything in the Gemara is literally mirroring everything in the Kabbalah. Anyways, but the Torah, the Talmud tells us in Tractate Yevamot 79a that the Jews have these 3 traits. And this is inborn. This is not something where you go to like Jewish school, Jewish value school, and you get. It's something that is inborn in your animal soul. Surprisingly, it's not even like the higher self. It's actually, it could be in the higher self as well, but it even comes down into the lower self, in the animal soul. A Jewish animal soul leans towards kindness, leans towards bashfulness, and leans towards mercy. And this is because, why? Because the Jewish soul issues very much is a very strong manifestation of God's attributes, in which chesed prevails over the attribute of din, gevura, and tzimtzum. Because in God, right, we said earlier, God, to do this whole system, it's not like a equal equilibrium. There's always a tilt towards giving and kindness to make this whole world enterprise exist. As it's written we say in Psalms, his chesed prevails over those who fear him. Meaning this is a intimation of that God's kindness is always presiding over the fear. Fear is gevura. Continuing on, the soul is also known in Kabbalistic talk as the daughter of the priest, a bas koyin. And not to get into why, but basically a koyin is known to be the uber kind people. That's one of their hallmark traits. And the daughter of the koyin is kind of something that's, is embodied, would mean someone who embodies the kohen kind trait, the kohen gene that they found, Now, the charity that issues from this source, when you give charity, again, you're basically a mini version of God's cosmos. And we say it always tilts towards kindness. So the charity that issues from this source is called the act of charity. Because the term Maisa act applies to that which is already done, which is constantly being done spontaneously. Thus, something existent, common, and constant. Here too, with regard to tzedakah, so an act is like a fact. It's like it's part of the system. It's not something that's acquired. It's something that's already there. Or it's an act, almost like fact, Here too, when you give tzedakah from the innate kindness of your soul, the trait of kindness and compassion is implanted in the souls of the entire house of Israel from aforetime, from the time they were created and that they evolved from God's attributes. As it's written, as we said, God blew into Adam's soul, a breath of life. He blew into Adam's nostrils a breath of life. And we likewise say, concerning the entry of each and every soul into his body, you blew into me. And he who blows from within him. Which is all just as, this is actually in Tanya chapter 2, explaining just, again, this is all metaphor, but the metaphor for creation is God spoke into being everything, speech, but he blew life into man, showing that everything else is from a more external level of creation, of God's creation, of energy. And the man is with breath, which is a metaphor for God's inner, deeper energy, a more essential God energy. Furthermore, in his goodness, God renews the act of creation, Maaseh Bereishis, every day. And likewise, we say they are new every morning, meaning, so, so every day you have, this act. God is kind of blowing into you. God's birthing you every day, like Adam, and blowing into you every day in a way. I mean, creation is kind of happening every day, every second. So man is always getting this kind of this inner reflection of God blown into him, which we say is always going to be a little more kind than not. That is what, just to summarize, Maaseh Tzedakah means the act of charity. It refers to the natural propensity of the soul of man to do kindness. But the term avodat tzedakah, service, avoda is toil. Service means toil, meaning it's not natural. It's something you have to work hard to do. Overriding your nature and will out of deference to the supreme will. Saying naturally you want to give a little at the office and go home and eat and enjoy yourself. But service means you're overcoming that, albeit, nice, somewhat nice, pleasant nature of being a little bit kind. You're going to be super kind, exhausting himself, for example, in Torah and prayer. For example, not for the charity, someone who, a chassid, for example, there's a minimum of Torah and prayer you have to do, but a chassid says, I want to do it beyond the minimum. There's everybody wants to do a prayer, at the very least, I don't know, everybody likes the term prayer. Sometimes they mean like a Navajo rain prayer, but prayer is a nice thing for a human being. But going beyond the basic, desire of prayer, to do it properly with a lot of, time and effort, we'd call it the service of prayer. Everybody likes to study a little Torah. Who doesn't like a little divine wisdom? But you do more of it. You really set yourself up, whether in a class or an amount, and you do it beyond. It's like exercise. Everybody likes a little bit of exercise, but to do it really well is a real toil to do exercise. In our case, too, with regard to charity, what would be the service of charity over the act of charity? It would be prompted by the nature of one's compassion and will. As our sage of blessed memory comments on the verse, give you shall give even 100 times. As I said in the title, there's the standard giving of the human being, which is an amount. And then there's the extraordinary giving, which doesn't happen without hard work to give more than is natural. And this is something where Hashem, it's interesting just to note that tzedakah is one of the only mitzvahs where God says, God knows how hard it is for us to part with our money. And a little bit is easy, but to give beyond the easy is hard, because person invests a lot to make their livelihood. And to give more than the minimum is very hard. And Hashem, therefore, out of all the mitzvahs, God gives a guarantee. You will not lose for giving tzedakah. It's actually written in the Code of Jewish Law, which is fascinating. The Code of Jewish Law is not like a motivation book. It's a rule book. And I believe there's a gloss there from the Ramah that a person will never lose for giving tzedakah. So it's almost, you'll probably never lose from any mitzvah, but I guess it's God realizing how hard it is and how we're expected to go beyond almost human nature to give way beyond. Hashem has, you know what? I'm going to give you a little peek behind the veil. You won't lose. You'll only gain.